this week we talked about. So we started Sunday and we just ended at noon, and then the kids have a case competition happening today, and the awards are 3,000, 2,000, 1,000. But there's another group doing that, and then usually on a Wednesday they have a career day. But I think with all the chaos that's happening, I don't know if they have their career festival fair this year. But so, for instance, we have a couple components. One, we have a bunch of different. Oh, I thought we were just talking. But look at
No, he always working.
I know. Yes,
he always
see.
working.
I think there's the first part of it, which is us telling our stories and building that connection. Right.
Connection.
We was once in these seats. So we're not telling y'all something because we had some silver spoon handed down. And so even though I didn't go to UAPB, but like 99% of the other ones, they were all like, nope, this is my hall. I know all of this, right? And so I've just been doing, I guess, almost coming up on about 10 years now. And so like I can kind of navigate myself around campus a little bit. But then we always come up with a theme. And then we work through that theme. So this year's theme was standing on excellence. And so we're defining excellence by the choices you make, the commitments you make, your consequences, and then character. And so we talk about the positive and negatives of consequences, because most people think consequences, we automatically think negative.
Automatically.
And I'm like, look, there are positive consequences. Right? And so a lot of positive consequences. Going to college, positive consequence of that is you've changed your financial capabilities. At least put yourself in position to change that, right? So that's a consequence that I don't think people think of, because typically we think about positive consequences as outcomes, but then negative as consequences, right? And so unpacking that with kids so that when they hear consequence, what I try to sort of align them to is when you hear consequence, I want you thinking about the choices I made, the commitments I made, and my accountability for my choice and my commitments. And so when we're talking to the students, you just kind of break that up in a whole bunch of examples. So one thing we do is we act. So it's usually multiple of us in a particular classroom, and then we rotate different classrooms around the campus. And also Career Services manages all of this. So we sign up. I'm on the planning team, so we meet like every Friday up until coming up with the themes, who's on teams, all of that. And so then, like for instance, today or these past couple of days, so we raised out, one of the other consultants is like, hey, does anybody in here procrastinate? And folks was raising their hands, right? And then folks were saying, I do my best work. And I wrote on the board, capital letters, NOPE, in every room. So the consultants, the professors, they was all looking like, I was like, all right. And so they was like, well, why you write that on the board? So I was like, well, let's talk about this. So you mean to tell me you do your best work with 2 hours to go? Make that make sense to me. If your paper's due at midnight, and it's got to be time stamped by midnight, and you don't start on that thing until 10 o'clock, you got zero room for error. But then you also don't give yourself best time to let it sink, read it again, review it, edit it, get a second opinion on it. Like all those things that make a paper better, right? Now, obviously, the complexity of that is thinking through it in a multifaceted way, which I know you'll appreciate this piece, is that, like, for instance, when you're writing a grant, and you know what the grant date due, but you might be toying with some ideas in your head about how you want to respond to certain grant questions. Now, I'm one of those people that I would just pick out the questions as I'm thinking through them and then respond to them, and so I'm building it as I go. But then some folks, because of time, like if you're a professor, you got class, you got grading, you got all these other commitments, but you still got to get this grant in. So there's a part where in the normalness of being human in our multidimensionality that you just can't prioritize all 10 things. And so what I try to position to them is that when you wait to the last minute, or when you sort of send the message in your mind that you procrastinate and you do your best work, you're actually sending yourself a false message. Because unless you train to do your best work under those intense circumstances, which is a diver, rescue folks, athletes, they do the training to prepare them for this short period of time where they have to do this. There's know training for procrastination in that same way. Now, if you build a model where you can do chunks of work in 2 hours, you're not ever going to feel like procrastinating because you've built this 2 hour sort of cycle. Well, guys, if you got 4 classes, you got all this other social stuff that's happening on campus, you procrastinating and saying, I prioritize all this other stuff. And now I got to the point where I got no room for error. Now, what people don't think about is what's happening inside your body. The stress. You cannot do your best work under stressful conditions like that. Again, not without the training, right? Again, an ER doctor has been trained under those circumstances to perform their best in that. But let's not take away their training and think about, oh, they can do this in the last minute. So you can't look at one half of the equation, right? And so people who procrastinate, you actually put this thing on yourself because now your procrastination has this built-in, I do my best work procrastinating. Now, if you get all A's and you do your best work and you procrastinate, you're most likely going to be in a small percentage of folks who are doing that. But most folks, if you're working at the last minute, are you getting the quality spell check? Are you making sure your points line up in the story as you talked about storytelling? Am I making my arguments in a clear and succinct way? Did I understand the assignment? Can I look like you giving yourself no room to bounce that back because you got one shot on goal? And don't let it be a midterm and it's 40% of your grade. You mean tell me you put 40% of your grade in 2 hours? That's what you want to do? And so then everybody started looking like, oh, well, you said it like that. And so I was like, look, think about the choices you made and the commitments that you made. Well, when you start to make your choices and commitments line up to that consequence that you want, and that consequence is I want an A, well, my choices and my commitments need to reflect sort of this. Procrastination shouldn't be a part of that definition. Now, if it happens, it happens. But so many folks playing for, oh, I got time. I could just start on this right at the last minute. I went to my college roommates. They would stay up all night writing the paper for the next morning. But that was their style. But they also knew that they was not doing their best work. They wouldn't say I'd work best under pressure. They were like, look, I did enough to get it done. Now, if you say I'm doing enough to get it done, that's one thing. But to say I'm doing my best without any preparation and I'm cramming things into 2 hours, man, cramming in 2 hours does just not lead to a great deal of success on a consistency. So
it makes me appreciate why it was important for you to differentiate between consequence and outcome.
That's absolutely right.
Because an A is an outcome, but the consequence for procrastination is greater.
That's absolutely right.
So while I may still have an A, the consequence of serving myself a false narrative and programming myself based on false narratives becomes a pattern.
That's right.
I don't fully grasp the material, which is the point of really being here. So I'm not evolving as a human being. I've got an A, but I fail to evolve.
That's right. That's right.
I may not have challenged a particular theory or belief system. I don't deepen the engagement. I best could.
That's right. That's right.
There's so much lost focused on outcome, but there's so much gained when I evaluate my commitment to my people, my commitment to my own knowledge base, to my family, those choices. Now I'm not just thinking A, because I can get that and leave a lot on the table.
And when we think about that lot on the table, let's go back to the first thing you leave off the table. Is when you procrastinate, you know what the first thing you do?
Please tell me.
Stop taking care of yourself. I don't have time to eat healthy because I got to cram this in. If I'm leaving this thing at 6 and I got to start this thing at 8, I'm not giving myself no time for no healthy meal. Now, if I plan for the healthy meal, that's a whole different thing. But the likelihood that we've planned for that healthy meal, if I'm saying also I'm at the last minute, look, procrastination doesn't come with a whole bunch of planning. There aren't folks who plan, and all of a sudden they got to procrastinate. There are folks who do a lot of planning and understand, here's some things that I punted off. But the things that they punt off has sort of a maybe low value proposition. So if I think about it, I saw your wedding band over there, so I think about a honey-do list. There's a honey-do list that if the pipe bursts in the house, I can't deprioritize that. I got to jump on that right now.
Yes, sir.
Right? But if my wife's like, hey, the yard need cutting, okay, I got time to get to that in the grand scheme of things. But I'm not walking around stressed that, oh, my God, I haven't cut the yard yet. Versus when you haven't done that paper yet, all the way up until the point that you actually stop and sit down, there's an internal stress mechanism happening. Because now you've got this constant worry. Man, I got to get this done. Now, success over this haul, you actually put that stress inside of your body. And we don't think about internal stressors enough because it's the first thing we do. It's almost like somebody who has to get a second job. You may know clearly why you want to get that second job, and you may have some really defined reasons on why. But to go spend 8 hours at this other place, you got an hour break here, and then you're going to do 4 hours here. How do you build in healthy eating habits?
Yeah.
Right? How do you build in rest for your body? Right? And so these are the things we don't think about. But then what happens is, and you and I are sort of at that space where all of a sudden your body starts to go, yeah, this ain't working no more. Like, I know we all used to say, at least back in our day, man, we can hang out all weekend, get up Monday like nothing happened. Now it's like, man, if we have a good long weekend, it's going to be like, guys, I'm not going to be recovering for another week or so. So I'm not going out that next weekend because I need some rest, right?
Modify and adjust.
That's absolutely. And so we think about now as we continue to sort of age, I can't be working all this time and I don't get no rest. But when you're so young, you're not thinking about that rest. But we know fundamentally how important rest is to academic success. It's also key to professional success. Look, if you ain't rested, you just can't do your best, man, because your whole body needs to rest, not just your mind, the physical part, right, the emotional part. You need that piece to really understand to something that you highlighted, which is that conditioning of that false narrative. Now I can't challenge that false narrative because I'm not rested enough. It's easy for me to fall to the default thing. Well, the default thing is I'm telling myself I'm doing good by procrastinating. And at the end of the day,
therein lies the need for honesty if we ever intend to develop.
That's absolutely right. Which you can't develop without it.
I can't be lying to myself about the benefit of waiting to the last minute. I've got to be honest. Like you said, no, you're not helping. I am not helping myself by procrastinating.
No. And if you don't realize that, when do you solve for it?
Never. Especially not if I'm looking at it as a benefit.
That's absolutely right, because that's in my mind, that benefit, right? So you get older, well, that procrastination ain't going to work at work. Because now, it's not about you getting an A. It's your boss saying, this performance ain't up to par. Well, that's a much more dramatic thing to happen versus a course you could probably retake, right? You can get some bonus points. Ain't no bonus points. I tell folks, ain't no bonus points at work, right? I've never had a boss be like, okay, you did this, but I'm giving you a bonus 3 points over here. You go back and redo this. No, you at some point got in the way of business continuity when we've had to stop to do the rework on something you threw in at the last minute. Because it's not well thought out, right? You didn't sort of bring anybody along the journey, right? You didn't get a chance to sort of socialize it so that people could. So now we're all seeing it for the first time. And what you have to be experiencing, well, I wouldn't say have to. I can imagine what the experience is like on the other side when you know you didn't put your best effort in and you're hearing folks critique the work. You got to be sitting there going, these critiques make sense. I ain't put enough effort in it. So, my philosophy is I don't like to do nothing unprepared. So for me, if I got to prepare, I know what time to prepare. Like I'm in a energy, I started last year, 2 credentialing programs. One is energy therapy practitioner, and then one is holistic health practitioner. So both of these are me thinking through and expanding my own intellect around what it means to grow. But as I've gone through that, which is sort of that space, which is being honest with yourself. And so through this energy therapy, one of the things that, in taking the energy therapy classes, we grow up on Western medicine. And as you know, Eastern medicine, Native American medicine, it's not about the pill. It's about leveraging the resources around you, which if you look in Western or Eastern culture or even Native American, rest was a big part of what they did. Right? And so when you think about the rest that they gave themselves, but then they also knew which plant had healing properties.
Yes.
If I ingest it, which one's externally topical. We don't even apply any of those within our Western medicine practices. Right now, you're starting to get some folks with alternative medicine and starting to combine the two. Because I think when I started going through the energy therapy, I started to sort of think about holistically. It's not East versus West, it's an and. But we're not taught how to leverage any of this stuff that's freely accessible to us. Because if we thought about it, most of us can make our own antibiotics with the plants that are around native to us. But nobody teaches us like I don't know if there's a class in Arkansas that teaches you on here are the healing properties of native plants to Arkansas.
We will do, but there are practitioners
That's right.
arising.
That's absolutely right.
Who are responding to their natural inclination.
That's absolutely right.
To heal humanity. And that goes back to that honesty. Let's stop resisting what is emerging naturally within.
Yep.
Those who feel compelled to pull together or integrate Eastern and Western traditions, even the Western and the Southern, just bring it all together. Right. Go for it.
That's right. Oh, I'm definitely
stop with the, as you mentioned, the false narrative. We tell ourselves so many delusional things as opposed to just grabbing hold to that instinctual pull.
Now, let's pull two things together. One, to finish back on that story, I'm already done with the classes, but they only allow you to submit one class at a time. Uh-huh. So as soon as they submit me one class, the next class is already ready to go. So on one class, they actually, I got like a 76%. You need like an 80 to go over. I was like, how the hell I failed this test? But I spent the weekend. Now I had a plan, and I got together. I did all the reading. That weekend, over 2 weekends, I went through and just knocked out all the classes. Finished the class, put it in the folder, went to the next class, put it in the folder. You know what I didn't do? Even without the planning, I ain't go back and proofread nothing. I ain't go back and do nothing. I was just like, I know I put in the time because I had a plan. When I got that, the first 4 was A's. Then I got to C. I was like, well, what's? So then I had to pay a $50 fee to retake that. And so I was like, yeah, you know what? If I paid another $50, let me make sure. So I spent another weekend just reviewing. I was like, oh, I'm glad I did this. I changed about 8 or 9 answers, but I got time.
Yeah.
Nothing was at the last minute. The thing that I didn't do was not because I was at the last minute. I think I was just overconfident thinking I didn't need to review my own stuff. But when I got that grade, it was like, oh yeah, you need to review your stuff. Because the first one was like, okay, I'm clearly getting this right. Clearly. And then in that fourth or fifth class, it was like, right. So I had to think about my approach, right? And so let me go and review. But the fact that they were already done meant now all I do is schedule time for review, right? So a different set. Second thing that I want to sort of highlight, which is something you talked about, and this is something that's going to be core to sort of my messaging, which is deconditioning. You talk about those false narratives. There's not a human alive or ever been alive, maybe except for maybe Adam and Eve, maybe, but that the world had not already self-described itself in the conditions that this is what it means to be successful. This is what it means to be white. This is what it means to be black. This is what it means to be this. This is what it means to live in this place. Your family had all of its own baggage.
That's true.
When you're born, your family is actually shaping this thing that's completely ready to be molded.
Facts.
Now, here's what's interesting about that, and you highlighted this piece as well, too. There's a inner piece of you naturally that is actually undisturbed by all of these false narratives.
So grateful for that, too.
And it's that thing that people say, man, something in me just said this wasn't right.
Talk about it.
That piece right there was that piece in your gut instinct is telling you that, yeah, I know people said this is like this and this, but your creativity is saying, well, I feel like I can get here this way. You have that freedom to now go and do that, but because we get shaped by this conditioning, we don't feel comfortable following our inner voice. Now, here's what's so complex and challenging about that.
Please talk about that.
I grew up, my grandmother was Baptist. I grew up in the Black Baptist church. Mm-hmm. Even as a kid, it always struggled for me. Why is there all these negative stories every Sunday? Like, we just can't have a day where we just cheerful, but there's always this probably you're damned to hell part of the messaging. Uh-huh. And it's like, that means every week, no matter what you go through, when you get there on Sunday, you're still about to hear some more negative messaging. At some point, I want my spirituality or my religion to give me the tools to help. Not to say, oh, if you do this, this is wrong. You do, okay, fine, I can get that. But if you think about Easter Sunday, I don't need the same Easter speech every Sunday. At some point, I need to know what the evolution of this thing looks like, right? But if you think about this now, you're raised by these folks who have preached to you your whole life that if you don't believe in God, you're going to hell, this, that, or the other. And then you start to meet some people who ain't never believed in God, identify with a different name for their God,
yes,
a different religious background, right? Now, even if you get curious about that, there's an inner struggle that you now have based on that conditioning.
Yes.
Am I going against what my family taught me?
It's there.
And then if I go and do it and I run into some struggles, is my family going to say, well, you're going through that because you don't believe in God no more, because you didn't do this no more, when it could be a totally different other factor not related to this thing. So when you get this conditioning that you have, it now for you to be free, you now have to think about the consequences of how somebody else external to you is going to respond about a choice and a commitment you're making based on what you feel is that thing for you.
I wish we were record so I could tell everybody, let that vibrate within you for a second.
Yes.
Don't move too fast
That's
off
right.
of what he just said. It reminds me of atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Well, that's a good word.
It looks like there's nothing there stopping us from going to the stars.
That's absolutely right.
But if you attempt to ascend with insufficient energy, you will learn quickly that
And
there is a
oxygen.
barrier.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely
They're
right.
like, there's no barrier. I can see clear to the stars.
That's right. That's right.
It is an invisible barrier designed to make sure you stay here unless there is sufficient thrust.
That's right.
But only those who would dare even try to ascend it will encounter it. And those who have tried can come back and report.
That's absolutely right.
And so, I'm just sitting with a man who has faced that atmosphere, that stratosphere, and said, I know it looks invisible. The conditioning. I remember there's a rap group called Black Star. And it was an intro to one of the songs. And he said, I've been conditioned. And the guy sitting next to him was like, man, you crazy. And he said, even my conditioning has been conditioned.
That's absolutely right. Absolutely. You know one of the conditions. One of the conditionings that's evolving and changing over time, which is going to college to be successful.
Yes, I'm talking to my son about it. I'm
now,
like, brother, son, listen.
That has never been the requirement for success. College is a man-made thing that we made up later. Because as you and I both know, or folks who are real well-versed, learning was an apprenticeship type of thing.
Absolutely.
You had to demonstrate to the person, I want to learn this craft, and you had to show a commitment, you had to make some choices, and then that person says, I'm going to bring you in and I'm going to teach you everything I know. Think about those old school watchmakers back in the day. As it should be. And I know you know this.
Talking about a master's degree.
That's absolutely
you were
right.
supposed to walk with a master, and the master will tell you.
You're now ready to go and do this thing without my supervision.
That reminds me of Dr. Miles Monroe brought up an excellent point when he normalized baptism. He was like, this is not a Christian tradition.
That's right.
He said it was a master's way to mark his apprentice.
That's right.
It was
symbolism.
You're right. So he said, if I chose you to be my master and I was going to follow your discipline, there was an initiation whereby I was marked.
That's right.
That's my master. I follow his discipline.
That's right.
He said that's all it was. Whether an Easter tradition or a Christian tradition or a Sikh tradition, or doesn't matter. If I chose you as my master, then I had some form of initiation whereby all could see.
That's right.
That's the discipline I follow.
That's right.
And so I'm a disciple because that's my discipline.
That's right.
And I intend to be a master in that craft.
That's right.
But disciple is just another word for apprentice.
That's absolutely right. Now, the other piece that I love how you pull those pieces out, because the piece of being a disciple is not for me to do exactly what you did. You have given me your framing. You have given me your framework. You have given me the guidance. Now, that inner thing in me, my own creativity, it's now up to me to sort of now create this thing in a sort of way. And I can certainly lean on and leverage those traditions, but I don't need to say that because this tradition was in place 600 years ago, it absolutely must be in place right now. Now, that is a different thing of saying, as a part of you learning this discipline, here are the 6 steps you got to go through. Now, for 600 years, these 6 steps have been tried and true, so we're not about to change our 6 steps. Now, when you graduate these 6 steps and you want to open up, let's call it a dojo, you want to open up your own dojo, and then you want to add in a couple different disciplines because you've learned multiple different types of martial arts. Well, now you get to bring those all in under your mojo.
Exciting.
And then if you bring somebody in, now what you're going to do, you're going to give them all 3 of those disciplines you had, right? And that is how we're supposed to continue to grow and magnify. I'm supposed to give you what I had, and you stand on top of it. So like, this kid right here, I've known probably since he was about maybe 10 or so, that I felt like he was not, direct to college was probably not his path because of his creativity. Now, I've never said that to him until he called and said, hey, I think I'm super proud of you. This is that. I haven't told my kids that they absolutely had to go to college. I said, you guys have to figure out what it is you want to do. My job is putting myself in position so that I can help you and your dreams flourish.
Yeah.
So like I told Napier, I said, look, dude, whatever you want to do, but you got to work 40 hours. I said, I want you to have a job so you can have the responsibility. But if he decided to backpack across some countries and he needed flights and stuff, no, that's what I'm going to do. But my expectation is every place you're going to get some type of job, whether it's bartending, barista, right, teaching English to some kids in this country, because I want you to get the experience of learning yourself.
Yeah.
Me and your mom have given you framing. The church is giving you framing. The school is giving you framing. It is now time for you to figure out, of all of this framing, who are you and what does this look like for you? And that's literally the journey that we all go through.
That's the great adventure.
Now, let me connect this venture to something we also know. Most of us don't work in the field we go to college for.
No, that's true.
And the reason why is because we've been conditioned to get the education before we get the experience.
Yeah.
I think I like biology because I was good at it in high school. I got a good grade in it. I kind of like the science, the curiosity. The reality is that we get so caught up in the subject and not the skills of what it is. And so when I was down in Pine Bluff, that's what I was telling these kids. I said, look, if you're a biology major, don't think that because you majored in the science that you can only get a science job. Because if you think about a scientist, you got to make the observations. You got to come up to some hypothesis that you want to test based on these observations, because now you need to test it out. I can do this anywhere.
That's right.
At a bank. Oh, you know what? We got these different marketing things. Okay, let me make some observations off these Okay, let's try this marketing thing for 6 months. Let's get the feedback back. Let's go back into the lab and go, guys, did we get what we thought we were going to get based on what we saw? And now we're comparing these 2 data sets. Well, if I could do this in a scientific space, I can literally do this anywhere. And so one of the things I think colleges don't even do well either is set us up with understanding the transferable skills that are associated with a college education. Because no matter what your discipline is, you're only demonstrating your ability to be taught something, ability to learn something, but you're not given the opportunity to demonstrate what that is. That doesn't happen until you get out into the real world, which is now I need to make some use of this in some way, form, or fashion, right? And so this is that space where when you talked about how do we get honest with this sort of stuff? But one of the things we know about society is society, by its very definition, it works because there's agreed upon set of definitions or whatever that I'm now calling conditioning. Because that conditioning of that agreed upon, here's one conditioning that people don't really realize. Yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. I don't require my kids to say that. My wife does require kids to say that. And I tell my wife, I say, um, if you think about the presence of being black in this country, which is why when you leave this country, you don't hear that yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. They have different words they use to show reverence for seniority, reverence for, seniority and all those things. Well, yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am were absolutely conditioned to us as a way we had to be able to speak to white people with respect. But yet they could call us boy. White people wasn't saying yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am to us. It's how we had to address them. And so the conditioning is that the first group of black folks who were getting beat and killed and all the folks who witnessed that, when there was defiance of saying yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, what do? In order to protect your kids, you say what? You need to say yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. You see, me and you as black men, having been pulled over before, what do we tell our black sons? That is a conditioning. But that conditioning, let's be clear, that conditioning is based on survival. But even as it's based on survival, you and I both know how humiliating, how demeaning the experience is. Mm-hmm. And we have to sort of toe the line of, at what point do I want to say you need to respect my sovereign humanity versus I want to live? And race in America almost comes down to that. It absolutely came down to that from, well, even though most people say 1619, we need to be clear about the first black people did not come to this country in 1619. It was well before that because black people were navigating the planet in various different ways. Again, there is another slave trade, but there was also the natural migration. People act like Africans were not sailing and trying to figure out what else was going on around the world, right? And so, we kind of have this.
We had it going on for a long time.
That's right. We kind of got this view that only Europeans were sort of trying to settle the world, but we all know that the Pythagorean theorem, the roots for that are in Egypt, even though the Greek came over, stole it, and now they're saying it.